Leadership webinar. My name is Laurel Cunningham with World Learning. My colleague Lakin Osherman will be co-hosting today's webinar with me. We also have several other World Learning colleagues here, Vlad, Aaron, Margaret, and many more. So thank you all. Many of you know us from our professional exchange programs, but for everyone else, welcome. Thank you for joining, and we appreciate your support. This webinar started because in 2019, World Learning implemented a three-part program called the Telling Our Stories 1989 Anniversary Exchange, funded by the U.S. Department of State's Citizen Exchange Office. The program brought together 12 students and 12 educators from Eastern Europe to travel across Europe and the United States to understand the history of communism and post-communism while developing their storytelling skills. Inspired by this program, we have invited several of the students from the program, in addition to other youth activists from Europe, to discuss their experiences. This year, we have seen protests around the world led by youth in the United States, Belarus, Bulgaria, and most recently in Chile, Nigeria, Poland, and many others. Today's panelists have experience in leading civic action, organizing youth, and sharing their stories. Before we get on to our great speakers, I have a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is hosted on Zoom, and we are also live streaming to Facebook and YouTube. We ask that everyone keeps their microphones muted unless you are the one presenting. This webinar is recorded, so if you prefer not to be recorded, we ask that you turn your camera off. We will start the webinar with brief introductions from our great panelists before moving to questions. Later in the webinar, we will also be taking questions from the audience, so please write any questions you have in the chat box. We will be monitoring them and hope to ask them to our panelists later. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this event to discuss youth activism and leadership. We'll start our introductions with our first panelist, Raphael, a student from Moldova and alumni of the 1989 program. Raphael?
Hi. Yes, so I should start, I think, with a short introduction of myself. Who am I? My name, as was mentioned before, I am Raphael Raetsky from Republic of Moldova, Chisinau. I call myself the host of a podcast, 11 Minutes podcast, a podcast in Romanian, and a documentary photographer. So I'm still a student, and yeah, that's it, I think.
Great, thank you, Raphael, for introducing yourself. My name is Lakin. I am a colleague of Laurel's at World Learning, and I will be co-moderating the discussion with her. So we'll go ahead and let our second panelist begin their introduction. Our next panelist is Nick, a student from Sofia, Bulgaria, who is also an alumni of our 1989 program. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
So I'm Nick, as you heard. I'm from Bulgaria. I'm a student still in the last grade, studying Sofia in the Sofia High School of Mathematics. It's some people say it's the most prestigious school in my country, but my plan is to study medicine in Germany next year, hopefully. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Nick. That's great. And we'll take your word that it's the most prestigious school. We won't question that. Our next speaker is Anna David. She's a student at the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. Anna?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Anna from Romania, actually. I'm very excited to be on here and honored to just kind of talk with a lot of inspiring young people. So I know that I'm promotional materials. It says that I studied at the University of Warwick, which I do. But yeah, I'm from Romania, and I also represent Forum Apulum today, which is an NGO from my town in Romania, which is highly involved in education and civil activism, especially among the younger population. And yeah, as mentioned, I'm a student here at Warwick. I'm in my final year and I do economics and politics. So in terms of kind of advocacy, I'm involved in sort of like literature activism together with internet activism, with the Forum NGO and the DCNSE, in a project regarding monitoring fake news and the impact that it has, kind of on the democratic process, especially during the pandemic. But here at Warwick, I'm also like involved in environmental activism, through the Warwick International Development Society, and yeah, about it for now.
Great, thank you so much for introducing yourself. And I'll go ahead and introduce our final panelist, Miran Vitushka, a student from Belarus who is also a 1989 program alumni.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miron, as was mentioned before. I am a student, a high school student from Belarus, BSU Lyceum, the name of the school. I am a head of students community. I am an alumni of Telling Our Stories 1989 Exchange. I would say I'm an activist. I participate in a lot of different initiatives that are happening now in Belarus, and that's about it.
That's great. Thank you. We're so excited to have all of you speak, and you all have such diverse perspectives to share with us today. So at this point, we'll get started with our questions, and I'd like to first ask, how did you become first involved in advocacy work, and what does this type of youth activism mean to you? We'll start with whoever wants to start. And just for the audience, just know that you can ask questions in the chat box as well, and we'll get to those later. So, panelists, how did you first become involved in advocacy work? Would anyone like to start?
If I start?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, great. So I started pretty early. So with the help of my sister, I could say, she was involved in more voluntary work, like different projects. So I came like packaged together with my sister to these projects and stuff, and that were the first times when I saw and felt what it's like doing advocacy work and voluntary work. And well, I took part of some summer camp focused on voluntary work again, and that's how I entered this. That's how I entered this domain.
That's great. Anna, how did you get started?
Yeah, so for me it was, I think similar to Raphael, it was a little bit initially just kind of doing a lot of volunteering in different local NGOs. So I just moved around a lot. So I did stuff related to awareness of breast cancer, all the way to kind of, it was a club, volunteering club, equivalent to kind of Interact International, but it was Leo International. I don't know how popular that is in the US. Then I moved to something sort of like religiously focused more than anything. And then I think that's kind of when I realized exactly how I do not want to advocate for things. But then I think all of these different experiences, what they had in common was they just made me realize that they're all like very one-time event focused things. So there was just no continuity to whatever we were doing. It was just maybe like, okay, let's raise funds for this cause and then donate these toys and then move on to something else. And that kind of made me, I guess, in the end realize that I wanted something a little bit more with more continuity to it. So that's how I stumbled upon Forum, and they do a lot more kind of education and advocating for the sort of change that is long term and is scary and it's uncomfortable because you cannot always actually, pick up the fruits of what you do. You cannot always say, yes, we just, raised £1,000 or we did whatever. It's harder to convince people of the message, but I think in the end it's a sort of like work that really does change perspectives and people and the society overall. So yeah, this has been my journey so far.
That's
Okay,
great.
can maybe I
Yeah, please.
I continue? Well, if we speak about advocacy as doing something in defense of our rights, I started pretty early. I think my first involvement in a kind of activism, my first participation in a protest was when I was 1 year old. I was sitting on on the shoulders of my dad. Well, it was one of the biggest demonstrations in Belarus. But it's a little thing just to give you a perspective of the environment I was brought up in. I've always had a strong belief in that things I do in what I do is right, and that we can do something for ourselves or on ourselves with no help from other forces, no waiting for something from someone. And this is basically how I progressed. I was a part of different initiatives in 2017, 18. I took part in organizing events, also in some international camps for guys from all over the Europe coming to Georgia, for example. And this is how I learned about the activism. And now I'm very much busy in different kinds of activism, mostly political, because there's a revolution going on in Belarus right now. And this involves well, participating in protests, but also some human rights defending work, social work, telling people about what we do, and organizing events as well. But I am sure we will talk about this later.
So I guess I should finish. I started also pretty early. I've always been very opinionated, and around the 5th grade, I started engaging in discussions online, like probably most people, on religious topics, because for some reason in 5th grade I decided I didn't want to have any religion. Then I moved from topic to topic, but yeah, I didn't have a formal introduction to advocacy. Right now, I'm also mostly engaged in political topics. I take part of the protests going on in Bulgaria that seek reform in the judiciary system and the overturning of the corrupt model of governing. And also, right now, I'm part of a club in my school that is doing charity work, and it kind of works like an NGO, and also part of the school newspaper. And I probably write politically related or socially related articles.
Great, thank you guys so much for that introduction. So we'll go ahead and jump to our second question. And again, any of you guys can feel free to kind of take the question and run with it. So now we'd like to discuss how you guys have been engaged in affecting change in your communities, which you have covered a little bit, but I guess the second part of that would be, how do you hope to affect change in the future as well?
I might as well start if we'll keep the tradition of me starting. So my first experience doing a project that had the main goal of changing, of making an impact in a bigger group of people was a project that I done with two friends of mine after a summer camp, actually, the summer camp that I talked about earlier. We had to implement a project after that. So we decided we wanted to have fun, while doing voluntary work and advocacy and stuff. So we decided to make events in something like a social party style. So we would rent a room, a space, where we would get some drinks and some snacks, and we would gather around 30, 40 people, and we would start the evening by having a speech, by discussing a topic, for example, women's rights and stuff. Then we would play games, and it's not very important, these details, but get the idea. And also, people were paying tickets, and the sum that we collected was donated. So it was like a two-in-one party where we both discussed ideas with young folks, and also where we got some funds to donate. And now I'm working on a podcast, but more about that later, I guess.
Go ahead. What's your podcast about?
Oh, okay. So my podcast, in my podcast, we discuss and we try to understand things around us, basic things that we use, that we eat, that we drink, and everything. So the deeper idea of a podcast is to promote curiosity, because that's one thing that that I believe we have a problem with in Moldova, in the Moldovan youth, that there is very little interest in things around us, and which results in poor numbers and statistics about youth participating in elections, for example, all the way to very easy spread of fake news, for example. So people are not interested, and by creating this podcast, I'm trying to create this interest and this curiosity in youth and teenagers, and youth.
Raphael, would you be willing to share the information on how the audience and others could listen to your podcast in the chat box when you get a chance?
The podcast is in Romanian, so I guess for the Romanian audience, it's called 11 minutes, 11 minute, so go ahead, 11 minutes, no problem. There are some questions here. Should I respond to them, reply?
We'll get to those in a little bit.
We'll get to them. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe I will continue what
Sure.
Raphael just said and say about changes in my community. But before that, I will just give a quick overview of what's happening in Belarus right now to understand what do we do now. There have been protests and a huge, I actually would call that a revolution, happening from elections which were on 9th of August. And since then, people are protesting very actively. Police is very brutal. In summer, in August, a lot of people, thousands of people have experienced police brutality in detention, myself included. And starting from September, from the very first day of September, when school started, youth, particularly students of universities, students of high schools, and working youth is very active in the protests. The most active, I think, are university people. We go on demonstrations, and the 1st of September, the students' demonstrations were brutally suppressed, and there were also people beaten in my school, on the territory of my school. And what I am involved right now is the continuation of the work that I have done in summer. In summer, I was just participating in the protests with my friends, spreading the information, organizing. Now in my school, we have organized a strong community. I'm the head of students community. Students all over the country have recorded, how do you call that? Well, basically videos against violence, against police brutality, and it happened mostly like in every university in Belarus and in a lot of high schools. And we have set a precedent for high schools. We were one of the first to record that. Now I am also involved, still involved in protests, but also involved in, for example, helping people to leave the governmental student unions, which they were forced to join. We are also organizing an event actually tomorrow where people can write the letters to political prisoners. And it may sound like not much, but it actually does a lot of change. I have seen and heard so many stories from Belarusians, from my friends, and maybe people of all ages. Most of Belarusians used to be like apolitical because it's easy to ignore the situation when it's dictatorship for 26 years. But this August, actually everything has changed. I have heard a lot of stories of people telling that their eyes have opened, but they still, there's still a lot of things that needed to be done, and this is what I do primarily.
So I could continue.
Sure.
I've been mostly trying to make change in my community with before last year with the charity work with my school club that works like an NGO. We've had projects like we go in the mountains and we try to clean some trash that's been disposed in the environment. Also, we had a project where we collected old clothes and we sent them to old people in facilities and homes, and also a project where we go into supermarkets and we buy some stuff, and because there are legal issues here, and we wait by the doors and ask some people to buy some of those stuff from us, so we can then send it to old people in villages in remote areas, villages with a very low population. But the COVID-19 pandemic has made charity work really hard. So I've been mostly active online during the first half of this year. And in the summer, the protests here started, and I've been active there because people are starting to wake up and realize that there is a need of change. The current governmental system is dysfunctional. The judiciary system is dysfunctional. There are multiple reports of that by almost every international organization, the UN, the European Union, the State Department of the US has also released some papers. So yeah, I've been doing that lately. And I think that's it, maybe.
Okay. So I think that everyone has said it's been very inspiring so far. On my side, so here at Warwick, I'm because I'm involved with the Warwick International Development Society. We have a very strong focus on kind of environmental activism. So I've worked on partnering with the more local branch of Extension Rebellion. So we worked with them on kind of organizing, coordinating protests locally, but also we had them come to campus and we organized kind of talks and workshops where they tried to inform the student population better about how the dangers of the futures are just coming basically closer and closer in terms of the climate risk. I'm also a cause representative here, and it's been, I guess, one of the most kind of important experiences from this role was last year when there were strikes happening all over the UK in all universities, done by academics and professors and people that have just kind of been not treated fairly inside the university system as members of staff. And as a student representative, I kind of had to side with students on this because in the end, they are kind of the ones losing in such situations. And when there's like major strikes and weeks of just not materials not being taught. But then it was a moment when basically I kind of said, no, let's side with the professors and the seminar tutors. And it was only because I started kind of emailing the professors and understanding what the problems were. And for someone that wanted to kind of like go into academia, it seemed very unfair, everything that they were going through in terms of payments, in terms of pension schemes, in terms of tenure, and all the working hours, the uncertainty that and basically I just started trying to convince more students and more student council representatives to side with the professors and try and boycott some classes and not go to everything. And it was very weird for me to do that in particular because I was just very scared of missing classes myself and kind of getting like not going to some classes even if the professors were not protesting or boycotting. But in the end, I've done it. And something that I've learned from it in particular is just that perhaps just kind of screaming around or just going around to everyone to talk about a certain problem is not necessarily always the best, but it's more about like learning who is the group that you should target first to go and talk about a problem and try to get them to be on your side and to unify in a way and to create that collective action that is so necessary. So in my case, I realized that third years really didn't care about the strikes and about protesting and boycotting and kind of not, going to classes simply because they were going to leave anyway. So they didn't have like this interest. But then first years, for example, they knew that if they didn't side and they didn't try to kind of take the actions with the professors together in their first year, then these strikes might happen again in the second year, in the third year. So that was like kind of, again, a very important point to realize for me personally about how you should go about and who you should kind of try and contact first and try to address it first when you have kind of an issue that needs collective action. And in terms of future plans, being in the UK, it's really nice, but I think I want to work more in bridging kind of the gap when it comes to working with Romania as well and working back home. And here at Warwick, we have a very like strong Romanian community, but most of the things that we do are just very basic, like just getting together for a drink. And there's just kind of less connection with the more important issues going on back home. So we did do things together that I think are more on the advocacy side of things. So in my first year of university, we kind of stood in line for 10 hours to be able to vote in the elections happening back home. Or we had ex-Minister of Health coming to speak to the Romanian society here at Warwick in this effort to kind of try and keep contact with back home and it's what's happening and take away key good aspects of advocacy and how it happens here, but then bring that in a way back home as well. So like for the future plans on my side.
This is great. I love hearing all of your answers because it sounds like you've all really affected change in different ways. But now we're going to get to maybe some of the challenges you've had in your work. So I'd like to ask, how do you get other young people engaged in a cause? It sounds like many of you have grown up in families or a community that is very responsive to you being involved in a cause. How do you get other peers or youth to get involved in as well? And then what are some challenges you've faced in trying to do that? It could be any range of possibilities, anything from logistics to actually getting people to care about what you care about. So if anyone would like to start, that'd be great.
Okay, if Raphael doesn't start, I will start.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I, as you know, growing up, I faced a lot of, people, both young and old, people of all ages, being, mostly ignoring important topics, but it was actually just a consequence of the conditions we were living in. For me, it was hard to understand why do people ignore important issues. Why don't people stand up for themselves? And it was problem, but eventually I think that this this dictatorship that lasted for 26 years, it doesn't go like that forever, and this pressure just it combines and explodes at some point, and this explosion is what we had. Of course, it was hard to convince people to participate in some action at first, but from what I learned, you can make your you can make something for change, and it doesn't have to be leading a demonstration, for example. In Belarus, a lot of students demonstrations started from just gathering in front of your university or your high school and singing songs, which is also, well, students are persecuted for that right now, but it doesn't take a lot of effort to just go out and sing a song. You can collect your friends, everyone knows the lyrics, and this is actually a really inspiring thing to do. And you can write a letter to a political prisoner. You can support people who are in jail right now. You can support their families. It doesn't take a lot of effort to just buy simple stuff and bring it to them. This kind of self-organization and community work was not very common, was uncommon in Belarus before the elections, but people, Belarusians turned out to be very self-organized, and we have done a lot of stuff in this way. So I could say that maybe for you to do something, it doesn't have to be something something great, something outstanding. It can be really small things, and they can still make a change. And I think this is what you can do. From the challenges that we have faced, well, of course, the first challenge is the police and the state itself. It's now a very open conflict, and they are really attacking the people, and it's very violent. But I think that this violence results in other problem, being ignorance, and ignorance going down. Because when they shoot on the streets, you really don't have a lot of you don't have a chance to be ignorant. You should have an opinion about that. But yeah, ignorance was one of the problems, and I am happy that it has resolved in some way. There was also a problem of us just not knowing how to do it. I have participated in protests before 2020, but they were smaller and not as consequential as those. And just knowing how to gather people, how to make logistics on the protest, how to organize people in doing some protest action, we didn't have that knowledge, but we have learned, and learned quickly. And I think that comes to that. The big challenge for me personally was to communicate social. I'm a communicative person. I do like to talk with people, but doing this kind of social marketing was not was a new thing for me. But you have to speak, you have to speak up, you have to tell people about what you do, and I have also learned to do that. So that's maybe it for me.
Okay, I will pick it up from here. Just in case that you don't have a dictator that is beating the crap out of your people, there are other ways of getting people very active. One way that I found very effective, teenagers love having fun. I know it's a very interesting thing, weird thing, I might say. People love having fun, and apparently it's a good enough motivation for a lot of people who never even had the idea to join any kind of voluntary or any kind of activity, when they find out that it might be even fun, they suddenly reconsider this. Because you have to think about this in a more scientific way. So, what do people need? People need a sense of belonging. And especially today, it's really tough to get to, it's really hard for a lot of young people to get this sense of belonging, because let's be honest, it's not like in movies where people go out in groups of 10 and just have a lot of fun and travel across America. It's more like where you have one or two friends and also you're anxious about yourself and you're afraid that you're going to lose them too. So people value this sense of belonging. And I saw this when we organized the events, the social parties that that I told you about. When we organized them, people who never even took part in any kind of advocacy group or yeah, they came to us and they were like, hey, if you need help or if you are recruiting new members in your team, we're here and please just let us know. So it was interesting. We didn't have any more spots for people, it was, the team was already too big. So yeah, people were still coming, and let me say the events weren't the best. They were getting kind of boring sometimes. But people still kept coming because people knew that at these events, there are people who are there for them, and at these events, people won't judge them for their ideas. So people like and people need, and people will do a lot of things for these two things, for fun and for social acceptance, for this sense of belonging. So you have to use these things.
Might I add something to what Raphael said? Yeah, fun is actually a great motivator, and before this events in August, it was also a thing for us to use it. For example, one of the biggest protests before 2020 was in 2018, and it was a big concert. Concert is also a way to motivate people. For me, a way to express some thoughts and to provoke some thoughts from my peers was punk rock as well. Just recording songs and telling people blatantly about about the situation, so they can't ignore it, possibly. So having fun, keeping it unboring, so people would not be bored doing something good, is also very important.
Right. Like, tell a joke and then tell something serious. That's it. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, so I could continue. I believe that there's a difference between an effective way to gather more people around your cause and a good way to gather more people around your cause, because the effective way might not always be the moral way of doing it. You could a lot of people appeal to and the other people's sense of I don't know, appeal to their personal interest, appeal to their selfishness, because a lot of people are really selfish, and it could be a good driver. For example, you could tell them that the climate is being really damaged. There will be it's a global catastrophe in 30 years. There could be an apocalypse. You could say a lot of stuff to motivate, to appeal to somebody's sense of personal interest, and he would say, yeah, I should do something about it because I'm affected by that thing. but I'm not sure that's the moral way, because by appealing to their personal interest, you could be doing a moral damage, because young people are already really entitled and really egocentrical. We believe everything revolves around us, and by feeding that with the activism, I'm not sure it's morally the best way. It could cause a lot of moral issues, and I think that one second. I think that we should appeal to people's sense of humanity, people's sense of empathy, because people they are kind of selfish, but they are also have empathy, and they also have humanity, and nobody is pleased when they see suffering around them. And I believe that when we show them how the real world and not the bubble in which they live, we could actually promote advocacy, because nobody wants to see suffering in the world. Everybody wants a good world, and people could actually be motivated by that. Yeah, it could be fewer people than when we try to use selfish reasons, but I think that it's the better way, because it also helps develop some personal growth in people.
Nick,
Well,
have you tried that approach with some of your peers or friends when trying to get them involved in
Yeah,
causes?
that's what I try. I try this appealing to personal issues and personal interest, and I believe it kind of works. And that's what I will try to do with the school newspaper when I write some articles there. I try to appeal more to their sense of humanity and see how that goes. Maybe we could use Google Forms or something like that to see how they react to that kind of stuff. I'm not sure it will be that effective, but I believe that it's the better way, nonetheless.
That's a great
one way,
perspective.
if it's okay, one mention here.
Yeah, and then we'll get
One
to
way,
Anna so she can get a.
yes, I'm sorry. And then if I can add a comment.
Yeah, no, of course.
Thank you.
So I think to kind of like echo the others, I think creating a sense of humanity, but rather more of repeated human interactions up to the point where you actually get to form a group and have sort of like a relationship works really well. But what we tried to do in one of the collaborations with Extension Rebellion was to kind of put that together with some education. So what we tried to do was we organized firstly a talk where we had the representative from Extension Rebellion come on campus and just explain better what they do and demystify some of the ways in which the media was portraying them. And even that in itself was not easy, to kind of like the right person in order for the student union to approve it. We had to submit risk assessments for the whole event. We had to submit more than just one application, and in the end we had to go with a really like cute grandfather who was just like an old sweet man who just was very involved in the organization, but it was just kind of to like portray to people that it's just, you know, it's not as scary, it's not just people just destroying the city or whatever. So once we've done that, like we successful, I think it was potentially like maybe because it was the kind of thing that is potentially controversial but also cool for people to hear more about. So we just kind of played it that way. And after the talk, what happened is that with the people that came, which were quite a few, we managed to create a WhatsApp group. And then from that WhatsApp group, we kind of like continued to stay in touch. And then when we organized a local protest in one of the closed towns, we kind of were able to just rely on that group. It was fun also because it was like a second interactions that we had with a lot of them at the protest. And we also did get together and have more like a sustainable drinks night as well after the protest, to kind of like try and reward ourselves and still bring like that fun element that the others mentions, which I think is very, very important. And then eventually we also had a workshop with someone that was not from Extinction Rebellion. It was someone that used to work in an oil company, and then who turned away from that and started advocating for environmental like issues and awareness. And yeah, I think that was fun, and it was challenging because it simply meant, again, kind of going beyond that one-time interaction and event. But I think other challenges that I've encountered beyond like, you know, organizing something where you can actually have that collective participation is more like in the dialogues and in the conversations that you have with your family and your friends. I think these can be really tough sometimes, especially if you come from a country like, I don't know, like Romania, like other countries like this. They're just very conventional in many ways, and learning to bridge that kind of gap, and not just when you're in a group of friends and someone says something that is just very controversial to say the least, not to go to them and just scream in their face you're wrong in front of everyone, but to rather like, you know, put it aside and then come back to them later and have a conversation one-to-one, and not want to explode just right there because, you know, their opinions from your perspective is just like so wrong, because, you know, it's a basic human right thing to have an abortion or something. And it's just like when people, you know, don't look at things the same way, sometimes very difficult not to react badly, but to kind of like, again, preserve the friendship and create a bond. And something that I've noticed in particular was that at some point I used to post poems on Instagram, which had very kind of like strong views on gender equality in particular. And then I started to have like a lot of people following me, and it was very interesting to notice that in the first place. A lot of them were guys as well. And it did make me wonder whether I was doing something right or wrong. And the reason why I was thinking wrong is just simply because you kind of, it's difficult when you think that, you know, that may be an important group that you should capture and you should listen. They should kind of listen to you in a way, or to different opinions, and then they unfollow. And then they don't get exposed to any of this. And it comes back to, I think, the biggest challenge, which is creating bubbles around us, be it in our relationships, be it on the social media, be it in everything around us. And I think the biggest challenge is how you can kind of get outside of it on a personal level, but also convince other people that these bubbles exist in the first place, that we have a lot of biases, and that, you know, we should advocate first of all for just moving and beyond that and understanding better others people's points of view.
Raphael, if you want to go ahead, you can.
I found what Nick said very interesting, and that's why I wanted to comment on the idea very shortly. So I find that all of these things should go hand in hand together. How I see this, the people who are more who have a more developed sense of I forgot how it's called, for empathy. But people who have a already more developed sense for empathy, they are the ones that start these movements. They are the ones that start these groups. They are the ones that are already doing stuff and in the bubble. At least they are the majority of the ones that are doing that. And I see that the majority of people who are not involved at all, who haven't even been interested before, I see that it's not that, oh, they don't care that there is pain and suffering in the world, but it's more like around me is four walls and my food. So it's fine for me for now. It's a human instinct to avoid things that are not affecting directly us now in the present. It's a thing that I researched, fun fact, it's a thing that I researched recently for my podcast about instincts. So it's a human instinct, because in the early days, And also it's a human instinct not to be very too empathic, too sharing. Because in the early days, if it was winter and you had a small ration of food, if you were to share with everybody, you were the first one to die. So how we developed as humans was to try and share just enough. It's a human instinct that we should all, it's not a human instinct that we need anymore. And this is where I see Nick as saying a great ideas, we have to overcome these instincts. And there are some people who do this better than others. And it's just a process. So if I see this moral as using these needs and these instincts to appeal to people, I don't see them being immoral. So it's a gray area where it's not that bad. It's human not to want to share. That's how I see this. So yes, thank you, that's it.
Thanks, Raphael, and thank all of the rest of you too. So kind of building off a little bit of what all of you touched on, and Anna mentioned a few of these specifically, like WhatsApp, Instagram. So if you guys were giving people tips or advice on the logistics and actually coordinating youth, what kind of platforms or messaging services do you guys think are effective for coordinating youth, and what kind of mechanisms work practically for bringing youth together and organizing?
This is actually very dependent on the country. So every one of us will say from our country which one is the best, I guess. But I see, for example, in the States, Twitter might be still alive. In Moldova, it's a weird bluebird. Nobody knows what's Twitter. So in Moldova, for youth, it's Instagram mainly, and I think this applies to many of us here. It's Instagram. That's kind of it, Instagram. Facebook is more serious, I guess, and it's more for adults, young adults eventually. So Facebook in a smaller proportion, and Instagram for teenagers and the majority of teenagers in Moldova.
Oh, I personally think that Facebook is a little bit more effective because there's the option to create groups, create events, and most of the events here are being created on Facebook because Instagram has a small number of options regarding that. But there's a growing community on Instagram that's creating all sorts of events, but I still think that here Facebook is more widely used and more effective because of the events options where there are thousands of people. You could promote the event to thousands and tens of thousands of people and get a lot of attention on Facebook.
Well, in Belarus, maybe, yeah, I would agree strongly with Raphael that it depends on the country and on the country specifics. In Belarus, messenger called Telegram is widely used. I don't know if you use it, guys. I really doubt it, but it's mostly used because of its anonymity and different layers of protection of personal info. Which is good and important if you organize protests in Belarus. But yeah, and it also has a lot of options to make group calls or basically group chats and stuff and channels and else. And you can also send like videos, audio, and different materials there. It's really convenient. Well, and I think it's popular, but it's not like a social network because you don't have a profile. You can't really promote an event. Well, you can, but it's not an event as you organize it on Facebook, for example. I don't think Facebook is widely used among young people in Belarus, but Instagram is also a way of doing things here. So I think combining these two, Instagram for its appeal, you can post photos there, you can promote your things there, and Telegram for its anonymity is the thing that we use here primarily.
Something I forgot. Could I mention something before Anna? I forgot about TikTok, and here TikTok is very widely used among young people, and it helps a lot as a platform where you can spread messages. Organizing is not that common, but you can spread a lot of different messages on Facebook, because you can post a video of yourself communicating those messages, and the people on their phones maybe get a sense of human-to-human interaction, other than in comparison to Facebook and Instagram, etc., where you just read a post or something. So yeah, TikTok plays a very important role as well, at least here.
Yes, I agree with Nick actually on this one with TikTok as well. I think for me, I don't know so much about organizing properly. I'm not sure if you guys saw about like that K-pop fans group that actually canceled like one of Trump's rallies or something. I thought it was amazing, and it happened over TikTok, right? So it's just like, it's a very good example how things could be and the power of social media. But TikTok, as Nick mentioned, I think it's also very useful, or it was very useful for me in terms of just getting more information during the Black Lives protests. I ended up following actually a lot of the Asian American community in US, despite not being there at all. But I was really impressed about a lot of really powerful voices, including people like Sandra Oh, which is an actress that everyone knows and stuff. They really stood up to the fight of, what should be another subgroup of the population. And there was always like this from unspoken battle between these two kind of races, and then somehow they just decided to come together. And I thought it was like incredibly powerful and something that you just get to learn from TikTok. And I thought that was amazing, and getting to follow these people then on Instagram and follow their journey and what they do as action is very inspiring on a daily basis. But something else that I wanted to add is, I think Facebook should remain a main focus, and it is. I mean, for us at work, it is the main focus simply because we have events that we put there. And I think one of the reasons why that is really fundamental is because you can see which one of your friends are going. And when you have a protest, that becomes really important. And there's actually like, because I do economics, one of the papers that we've recently looked at in one of my classes was about a study on Hong Kong, and how people in Hong Kong actually ended up going to a protest or not. It was kind of like a randomized control trials where they told some people how many will actually show up, and other people they didn't tell how many of like their friends would actually go to the protest or not. And giving like people that sort of information actually became very powerful in understanding if they would show, like if they themselves would go to the protest or not. So I think Facebook is just a way for us to see who else is going, be it a protest, be it whatever event, be it just whatever. Like having that connection and understanding, like seeing that one friend is going might be enough. Because a lot of times I feel like that I would want to go to a lot of things that are happening, but I don't know anyone. And I'm afraid to ask, and it's making me like uncomfortable to just show up by myself. So if I see that someone is going, it just completely changes things. And I think that that's something that Instagram doesn't offer at the moment. And that's why Facebook is still so powerful in this sense.
Yeah, I think these are all great perspectives. I think Anna's point about being able to hold people accountable is really important. I have Instagram and Facebook. I've been holding out on TikTok, but maybe this is the push I need to get into TikTok world. So now we're going to go to some questions from our audience before we wrap up for the day. I'm going to ask Christina's question. She speaks to an adult perspective. So how do you react when people patronize you or maybe condescending? What do you do if you encounter resistance from adults? And maybe this could be as simple as something that they don't use TikTok, but maybe you have a more personal experience about having some resistance from older adults.
Okay.
Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, Miron, go. Miron, go.
Okay. Well, yeah, I have experienced some resistance from adults, and it was actually, the feeling of trying to defend the young, or maybe by educating them about something is a widespread thing. And it can be a good thing as well. I mean, every parent wants to defend its own child, but it's also one of the powerful things of keeping the young inactive. And I have heard these phrases a lot, phrases like "you're so young, you can't vote yet," and "why do you engage in politics? It's not your job, it's not your business. Why do you do that? Just be calm and stay up behind it, and just do not interfere, and you will be safe. Otherwise, it can lead to something bad." And it was really a widespread thing before the changes happen, but it's still common. And I think the main way of actually resisting to that is being educated about your rights and about what you can do. You, of course, have the right to participate in protests. You have the right to express yourself. You have the right to be opinionated and to express your opinion. And you just have to know that you have these rights, and no one can prevent you from doing that. And even if it doesn't depend on who is that. Maybe it's the parents who are worried for you, or your school headmaster who is who is in fear for his position because his students are active in a social and political way. You just have to be self-conscious and self-aware, and aware about your rights. And I mean, no one can take your rights from you, and just know it and go with it.
Yeah, I mean, the rights thing is great because in Moldova also we have this problem where adults are like, why do you even care? And also adults are like, you have so many rights, but you don't have any, but you don't respect the things you have to do, which is not true, of course. It's just a way of saying, I don't care about your rights. You are a kid, leave me alone. So how I see this is more adults, the ignorant adults, let's say it that way, because there are some great people out there, a lot of great people out there, by the way. People don't want to face the fact that that they are not the main factor in change. Yeah, so let's say it that way. Youth in the last few years has taken a lot of power in their hands by going out to protest, to request that their rights are respected. And it wasn't always that way. And it is a weird thing for many people in general, not only adults. Especially in the post-communist era countries, in Moldova, yeah, let's say, where you're not allowed even to speak, like you're not allowed to tell a teacher that he is wrong. And I mean, if you do, then you will face consequences, and it's up to you to assume those consequences. Unfortunately, you have to. For example, I wanted to go to a protest It was a protest for, well, nature, ecological stuff, yes. So I had to go from, I had to leave my class, yeah. And I took my bag and I wanted to head out the door. And it's clear how Miron said, it's our right to protest. And guess what happened? The teacher stopped me and said, where are you going? And I said, yeah, I'm going to protest. And said, you didn't even ask me, one, and two, I'm not allowing you to. And I was like, I'm sorry, this is not a question. This is a direct affirmation. I am going to this protest. You are not stopping me. Then I had to have a talk with school. I forgot what was the word, but guard at the entrance of a school. There is always a guy who, yeah, just acts like he's guarding the school. So I had to have to speak with him too, where I had to explain to him I'm going to a protest and explain to him that it's not his decision, it's not the school's decision, it's my decision. A lot of times, as I said before, I'm a documentary photographer also, and a lot of times, somewhere like 4 times it happened that I was physically abused like hit or mostly hit by adults in public at protests. And I mean, I was, I don't know how it's in English again, I'm sorry, but I was directly, you could say, attacked by our president's bodyguards. When I was photographing the president in public space, I saw him and I decided to take a photo, and then a guy with a hoodie on came to me like he was a drug dealer and asked me what I'm doing here. And I explained to him, and guess what? He told me, delete the photo or you will have problems. Now, I was kind of dumb, but I wasn't dumb enough to believe that that I would have any problems. I just ignored him. Now, here is the idea. One way to it's like you have to act, you have to respond to these adults like you're responding to a bully, to a guy who wants the attention, who is just seeking the attention and the idea that he's in control, he's in power. I'm sorry, you're not, and you can just ignore this guy. That's what I do, that's what I did, and mostly it worked. I had some consequences again, but these are things that you have to assume and just go ahead with them. Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
I think on my side, as it was mentioned in one of the questions, I think at kind of like family level, I was privileged enough to not have to try very hard. I think it depends on like even this, like if we're talking to like any adult opposing you or just kind of people close to you opposing you and what you're doing. So in that sense, it was easier, and I think in the family, yes, there's still people that have hold certain views, but I think it's like what's worked for me always is to just not have necessarily the bully approach, but just simply say like all of us are the future and things are going to change regardless of if you want it or not. And I'm not sure like how effective like you could really say that is, but that just is like for me to be able to say that it's just always just kind of been very powerful, because I think when older people hear this, it's just kind of like you take away a form of power from them that they don't know they have in the first place. When you say, it's we are the future and things are going to change, and then in 10 years, I promise it's not going to be anything like what you think it's going to be like right now. And it scares them, but it just leaves them, from my experience, it just leaves them without anything to say. And I think that's great. So that's just it's very basic. Again, there's a lot of other forms of convincing and having dialogues and conversations. I believe a lot more in that than in fighting people or trying to get your opinion across in more like, I don't know, violent ways. But again, it depends a lot on the context and where you are. But this kind of just, I don't care what you think, I'm going to do it anyway, and we're going to change the world anyway, regardless of your thoughts on this. Is yeah, I've just found that to be really powerful.
Well, I think that when somebody approaches you, that doesn't like the fact that young people are so active. Maybe you could try to convince them and use some reasonable arguments instead of just reacting with an angry voice. Something like, I don't care what you think, I'll just do it anyway. Like, I don't think you should do it in an angry way, because I think Raphael does it, said it with some anger in his voice. I think you should be more humile, if that's the word, and just try to give some reasonable arguments, and if that doesn't work, then if the person is too narrow-minded and wouldn't even consider the other points of view, then you should just stop the discussion and just say with a calm voice that you'll just do it, and what Aina said, that that we are the future, and it's our choice what to do, and how to live our lives and stuff like that.
Can I add something to what Nick said, just really quickly, and to everything that we have said on this matter? I was actually really surprised and pleasantly surprised that in response to the police violence which was used against the students, elderly people just went on the streets and protested, and they called it march of granddads and grandmothers, and it was really great. And this combination of students marching and elderly people marching is actually a common thing in Belarus right now. It was the last march of this kind was this this Monday, and I participated in it as well. And just the sense of feeling that the people who you always consider to be your to be exactly opposite of you in the perspectives of politics and stuff are marching together with you. And I would wrap it up and say that it's not always a resistance, not always a fight. It's mostly conflict, but to have these moments where you come together with people of all ages is really great as well.
Thank you, guys.
Could I add something?
Yes.
Give more context to what I said before. I believe that most people who say stuff like that to young people who advocate for something, I'm not sure they're opposed to it. It's more like they don't understand it, and because they've never experienced something like it, because our generation is different in almost every aspect, maybe. And that's why I don't think that we should react with anger, because that only alienates the other person, when in fact you could actually try to convince them and explain to them why you're doing it in maybe a humane way, so they could actually change their mind and in fact understand what you're talking about.
Thank you for adding that. So we're going to jump to our next question from the audience. This one is from Ellen, who I see did have to leave to go to a different meeting, but we're going to go ahead and address it since we will be sending out the recording of this. And this is a question I also had for you guys as well. So it sounds like a lot of you had really great experiences during your formidable years or when you were young with your parents who might also be involved in activism or really encouraged you to be involved in those spaces. But there are a lot of people who don't have that kind of background and didn't grow up kind of having this activist exposure. So Ellen specifically mentions she's a cultural affairs officer in West Africa, and there it's really the old leading the young. She says there are linguistic differences, ethnic differences, just a whole host of things that contribute to a passive youth behavior. So she's seeking ways to kind of catalyze the youth, and maybe youth specifically who didn't grow up in activist settings. So do you guys have any advice for her or guidance on that topic?
I believe that it is quite a challenge to bring people who never had this exposure to advocacy before. It is a big challenge to bring them into this thing. But it's possible, again, as we mentioned before, using this aspect of fun and belonging, the need of belonging. I believe that, people, from my own experience, people wanted to take part of a group activity that helped somebody else and that helped them as well. So I see this as one way of getting people, also through friends and the group around you. At the beginning it might be harder because, not all of us have a bunch of friends. I don't have a lot of friends. I have 1 or 2 friends as well, But it's more of a thing that, colleagues, people who you interact with at your university or school, well, just get them to a party, a social party, and there doesn't have to be a lot of alcohol and stuff. It just drinks like cola and some snacks, discussions, and board games. That's it. That's enough to get like half of the audience interested in getting into advocacy and doing something about, the world around them and just getting more active.
Well, I think that another aspect she could think about is the use of internet and websites, because for me personally, internet helped me get access to a lot of different views and explore different ideas and stuff like that. And if she could somehow use some sources to create events online, or create some I don't know, just find a way to use internet, because it's a major aspect of our world, the global world. So you could think of some way to use that to promote those ideas and promote ideas of advocacy. And yeah, that would be my advice, I guess. And I agree with Raphael about the sense of belonging.
I think just to follow up a bit on what Nick said, because I think it's really interesting about the use of internet. I agree. I think it can be a really, really powerful tool. And then, but it starting a bit I think how we use the internet is just, it's highly guided by what we already know, what we're already interested in, what we already believe. It's harder, as I mentioned before. I think social media can just be kind of just a whole way, just end up just with the same kind of beliefs and systems and people. It may be sometimes harder to actually, step outside of the bubble. And in that sense, I think bringing that face-to-face interaction and that exposure to how things be different, and creating the information that Raphael mentioned, and getting those people to know outside people that do different things, I think is really, really important, and educating them in the process, because then you can trust that they will be using the internet to affect what to look up for and what to search, and how to use social media more effectively, and get the benefits that you can get from like the information, knowledge, education point of view from the internet, which again can be a very powerful tool. Another thing is, I think that African country, I really like development economics as a subfield of my field. And if there's one thing that I learned is really important in these countries is empowering women and the absolute change that they can make in their communities. If you just focus on young girls to start with, or women entrepreneurs, or women farmers, or women of any sort, I think moving on from there, it's easier to make sure that these women will kind of pass on their knowledge to their children, because they will be often in these countries, they are the ones that spend the most of the time with the kids at home, the one providing the informal education, and the one fighting for their kids to get the formal education as well. So again, I think that is probably something that is not necessarily being done enough on the kind of informational level or advocacy level of empowering of women and their rights and what they can achieve. So yeah, that's all I had to say on this.
I will also add, I agree with the things that all the guys and Anna said. I would also say that discussion and provoking a discussion can help if you are really confident in what you do, and if you're confident in the fact that it is true and you're doing right. Just be educated on the topic, and provoking a discussion with people who didn't have the exposure to that can really help to bring them in the topic, because sometimes them being against the things you do is just a product of them not being educated about the things you are fighting for, and the things that are important to you, because they have had different backgrounds, and yeah, it's a thing as well. And I will strongly agree with Raphael. Most of young folks are really interested in doing something that gives them a sense of belonging, or doing something cool, maybe doing something fun, and good things can be fun. And if you just find a way to communicate with them, to provoke a discussion about these things, to include them in what you do, this could change their position, and this difference and backgrounds can be really not important.
Great, thank you for these awesome answers. I think all of your different perspectives and approaches really illuminate the different ways you can engage youth and further the causes that you are involved in. So my last question for the day is one word. Please tell me how you feel about the future of youth activism. Just one word. Anyone can start.
I feel good.
Good. All right, we'll take it. Good. Anybody else?
I would say the word bright, because I believe the future will be bright, definitely.
Bright. Good.
Trustful.
Hopeful or trustful?
Trustful.
Okay, got
Trust.
it.
Trust.
Trust.
I'd say curious, because I'm not exactly sure what the future holds, but I'm kind of optimistic too. So 2 words, I guess.
Good. Cautiously optimistic. That's great. Well, my word after hearing you all speak today is inspired. I am so hopeful for all the change that you all are bringing, and I want to thank you for speaking with us today. I'd also like to thank everyone who joined our call today on the Youth Activism and Leadership webinar. Thank you to my colleague, Lakin Oshman, for helping me host, and to all of my World Learning colleagues that helped us get this off the ground today. Thank you also to our partners at the Digital Communication Network, notably Diana, Ash, and Mariana, who helped us get this event out there so everyone could join. We will be in touch in the future about upcoming webinars, and we'll make sure that everyone gets a recording to this webinar as well. Thank you all so much. We so enjoyed having you today.
Thanks a lot.
It was great.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It was glad to see your faces again.
Thank you for joining.
I mean, thanks for taking your time to see us speak.
Good to see you guys.